Well, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for the launch of Legal Education in the Classroom, the transformative potential of community engaged teaching and learning. My name is Suzanne Egan, and I will be introducing my co-authors and speaking about the run of the programme today. But it's wonderful to see so many colleagues, friends, students, educators, and supporters with us online. So on behalf of my co-authors, Deirdre, McGillicuddy and Alison Struthers, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be here to celebrate the publication of our book. And we are especially delighted to be joined by our guest speakers, Professor Laura Lundy and Professor Dawn Watkins, both of whom have made enormously significant contributions to scholarship and practice in fields connected to the themes of this book. So before I say a little about the book itself, it might be helpful, as I say, to briefly outline the running order for how this event will unfold. Excuse me. I'm going to begin by introducing the rationale for the book and describing my own contributions. We'll then have the pleasure of introducing Professor Laura Lundy, who will offer some reflections on the themes of the book. Following Laura's contribution, my co-author Ali will discuss her own chapters and the school tasking project, which is centrally featured in the book, before introducing our second guest speaker, Professor Dawn Watkins. Dawn will then share her reflections, after which Deirdre will discuss her chapters on child-centred, rights-based approaches to legal education and the crucial question of how we teach if legal education is to be genuinely transformative. Deirdre's then going to lead our question and answer session and then bring the event to a close. So beginning then with a brief description of the book, the first thing to say is that it is essentially emerged from a shared belief amongst ourselves as authors, and one which I know our guests also share, that children and young people are both capable of and entitled to meaningful engagement with law. Too often, law is perceived as something remote, technical, and reserved for lawyers and legal professionals. Yet we know the law shapes children's lives every day through their education, their family life, their citizenship, rights and responsibilities. And we believe that young people benefit enormously from opportunities to understand the legal world around them and to see themselves as active participants in it. So the book explores the transformative potential of bringing legal education into primary school classrooms through community engaged teaching and learning. It combines theoretical, historical, and pedagogical perspectives with practical examples of how legal concepts can be introduced to children in ways that are accessible, participatory, and, above all, enjoyable. So at the heart of the book are two detailed case studies. The first is Law in the Classroom, which I've developed here at UCD, which Deirdre, sorry, I call her Dee because she's a good friend, has enriched over the years with her long-standing engagement with the module. And the second is School Tasking, developed by Ali at Warwick. Although distinct in their design, both projects share a common commitment, that is, introducing children to legal concepts through active learning and engagement, and doing so in schools situated within socio-economically challenged communities where access to higher education and the legal profession may often seem distant or inaccessible. And together, these projects demonstrate that legal education can be creative, inclusive, and empowering. They also show how partnerships between universities, schools, and communities can create transformative learning opportunities, not only for the students or the children in the schools, but also for the university students and us as educators. The book also reflects a broader commitment to legal literacy, children's rights, and civic participation. It asks, what role can law play in helping young people to understand the structures that shape their lives and to develop confidence in engaging with questions of rights, responsibilities, justice, and democratic participation. So my own contribution to the book consists of two chapters. The first, chapter 2, is called Setting the Scene, A Contextual History of Legal Education in the UK and Ireland. And this chapter examines the historical development of legal education for children and young people across both jurisdictions. And it's intended basically to provide the backdrop for the rest of the book by exploring how legal education has evolved, how it intersects with citizenship education and human rights education and public legal education, and why there is growing recognition of the importance of legal literacy in contemporary democratic societies. My second contribution is Chapter 6, which explores the transformative potential of mock trials through the Law in the Classroom module at UCD. And this module basically involves students working with primary school pupils over a series of classroom sessions, exploring legal concepts through discussion, role play, and collaborative activities. And then the programme culminates in a mock trial here at UCD in which the children assume the roles of lawyers, witnesses, judges, and jurors. And what's particularly striking is how readily children engage with complex legal ideas when they are presented in an accessible and participatory way. And through the mock trial process, children are encouraged to think about fairness, evidence, justice, rights, and decision making, while our university students develop skills in communication, public engagement, and reflective practice. The experience becomes a genuinely reciprocal form of learning, and for me, captures the transformative possibilities of community engaged legal education. And looking ahead, our ambition is not simply to sustain the programme at UCD, but to build capacity for its expansion nationally. We are also actively exploring ways in which members of the judiciary might become involved in supporting and enriching this work, helping to bring children's learning about law even closer to the realities of legal practice and public service. And in that regard, I'm particularly pleased that Miss Justice Emily Egan of the High Court is joining us today. Judge Egan, who's no relation but is in fact a former colleague of mine at UCD, has been engaging with me on ways in which the judiciary might contribute to the future development of the programme, and I'd like to acknowledge her support and interest in this work. As we think about the future development of legal education for children and young people, questions of participation, voice, and rights remain central. And those themes run throughout this book, and they bring me very naturally to our first speaker. Now, it's often said that a speaker needs no introduction. And while protocol requires me to say a few words, there are few people for whom that phrase is more apt than Professor Laura Lundy. Laura is Professor Emerita of Children's Rights at Queen's University Belfast and Professor of Law at UCC. She's internationally recognised for her pioneering work on children's rights and participation, and she's perhaps best known for developing the Lundy model of child participation, a framework that has influenced policy, practice, and research worldwide. Her work has transformed how many of us think about children's rights, voice, and participation, and has shaped the thinking of scholars, policymakers, and practitioners far beyond the academy. For many working in this field, her scholarship has been both foundational and inspirational. And on a personal note, Laura supervised my doctoral research at Queen's University Belfast together with Professor Alison Mackenzie. And my thesis essentially explored the role of law in human rights education. And Laura's scholarship, encouragement, and deep intellectual generosity have profoundly influenced my thinking about children's rights, participation, and legal education ever since. Indeed, many of the ideas that underpin this book owe something to the pathways of inquiry that Laura helped me to explore years ago. And so it's therefore a particular pleasure for me to welcome her to this launch. So without further ado, I will hand the floor over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm blushing, or maybe I'm just hot, but I'm definitely blushing. I'm honestly really delighted and honoured to be here, and just to be given a chance to say something about this. I'm going to have some very brief comments about three things. The topic itself. I want to say something about the authors, and then I'll say something about the book. And starting with the topic, Suzanne, you've already captured it for me. I don't really need to say much. This is an issue that has been very close to my heart and my work in life, for the last 37 years. I think I always had this, before I became interested in children's issues, I was always looking to see how you could make law more accessible to people. I ran a program at Queen's called Law in the Community. And it was always this sense that, does law mean anything if people who the laws are about, the subjects of law, don't understand it? And it was always there. Whenever my work then took a turn, 20 odd years ago to working more on education and children, I started then really focusing on how do children understand it? Does law, do rights mean anything if children don't actually understand and can't access them? And so my own work had been, largely around, creating child-friendly communication, but always this notion they should understand the law. They should understand the law. So this topic is really critical and important, always. But it seems even more critical and important at the minute. I think with everything that is happening in the world and is happening in children's worlds, it's even more important that we have children who understand their own rights and understand the rights of others and can access that. Not least when I was thinking about it, not just so they can understand it and understand what's happening to them, but they can change laws. This concept that you need to know what laws are is to see if these laws are the right laws for you, to enable them to, in some ways, to become activists and to seek to change. And we're making a lot of law about children at the minute, often without children, particularly in a school context. So I think the book is not just, important always, but particularly critical right now. And then the authors. So I know all three of them, I think, quite well, and I'm going to do it in chronological order of meeting. So the first person that I got to know was Dee, and I know you as Dee. I've never not known you as Dee. And that was when you were a PhD student. And of course, you've always had this incredible passion and interest in social justice and education. And I followed your career with such interest as I've watched you, the way in which you have that scholarly depth, but this interest in practice, this educational experience, this desire to bring it into the classroom. And that's, really critical and such an important contribution to the book. And then Ali, I had the honor of examining Ali's PhD. And at that start, Ali's like a girl after my own heart, the lawyer that was interested in education and was very interested in making this difference in understanding, what it means for children to understand their own rights, human rights education in primary schools. And then watching in awe as you have developed the school tasking project, again, that person that doesn't just write and think, but wants to see how this works and find this opportunity and has really run with it, Ali. It's amazing. It's amazing. So, and to bring that into this book is just, a wonderful example. And then Suzanne, the one I met last in person, but I knew Suzanne's work long before I knew Suzanne, but not this work, because Suzanne has a whole other career and is very well known for her work on the UN system. So I knew that work and drew on that work. And when she appeared one day in my inbox thinking about doing a PhD, what did I do? I told her, don't be silly. Don't you be doing a PhD. You don't need a PhD in this. You already have a PhD. I think I spent a year trying to talk you out of a PhD. Well, how silly was that? Because, one of the greatest privileges of my working career was to supervise your PhD, Suzanne. It was amazing. I learned so much from you. This whole concept of law is powerful knowledge. You just, every time your reading came through, I used to forget to correct it. You're meant to make suggestions. I was just so enjoying reading it. And there was so little to say. So my point is, what a combination of authors to bring together, your strength, your passion, your particular expertise, law and education into this book. I can think of no better people to do it. It really is an incredibly powerful combination. And then the book itself, it reflects you, it reflects your work, it reflects your personality. It is legally sound, it's educationally sound. It has this transformative theme around it. And then all of that, I think, brings, the fact that all of you have this focus on practice in these very different ways, the fact that you have been putting this together and you put these ideas and the book does that. So I'm genuinely really delighted and honored that you asked me to be here to speak to it. And that's really pretty much all I have to say. So thank you and good luck, and everyone should buy it and read it.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was very kind of you, and you're always so insightful, and it's wonderful to hear you speaking. And I think we're all very touched by what you said about us. And I agree with you entirely about Suzanne's thesis, which was, I think, the best thesis I've ever examined. So no corrections, couldn't think of anything to say in the vibe. But so Suzanne is a superstar as well. But thank you very much for that, Laura. That was it was lovely to speak about the book in that way. And I think it's over to me just to briefly talk about my chapters and contribution to the book. So my two chapters, the first one focuses on the importance of early legal education. And those of you who know me know that this is my soapbox, and I get on this soapbox anytime that the opportunity arises, that I really firmly believe that we need to be teaching children about law from a very young age, not only because they're born with those rights, and if they don't know what those rights are, then they become essentially redundant, because you can't, if you don't know your rights, you can't access your rights, but also then the age of criminal responsibility being 10, you're subject to a law that you know nothing about. So I think for that reason alone, we should be teaching children about the law in schools. But it's not just for that reason. I think there are many, many reasons that we should be teaching children about law. Legal skills, the development of legal skills is crucial for children's flourishing. Skills such as reasoning and oracy and advocacy, critical thinking, these are all skills that children are going to need as they go through life, particularly in a world of increasing AI doing everything. We want children to have these skills to question what they're reading, to question what they're being told, to challenge populist narratives about law that, as we all know, the government tends to perpetuate, that if you're a good person, you don't need the law. It doesn't matter that we're stripping back all of these protections. If you're a bad person, it's only if you're a bad person that you'll need the law. And it's only issues like the post office scandal that can actually throw that into question, that anybody can be subject to the law, whether they're guilty or innocent. And actually, we need that justice system to be fully functioning and operational and fair. So getting children to really understand that, I think, is crucial for them to be able to challenge what they're being told by the media, by governments, by anybody else. Learning about law can be fun. That's hopefully what school tasking is doing. It's showing children that law is interesting, it's engaging. They can really sink their teeth into some fascinating topics and argue, are Jaffa cakes or biscuits? They can really go to town on whether or not they think it's a cake or a biscuit. And I disagree with the law. I think it's a biscuit. And then hopefully, if we can get that legal knowledge into children who are from less advantaged backgrounds, we can start to widen access to both legal education and the profession, which historically has been a very elitist profession that relies on networks of, somebody's father is a judge and their father before them was a judge. And so we want widen access for all children from all backgrounds if they're interested in studying law. So that is my first chapter on the importance of legal education. And then I have like Suzanne, I have a case study chapter, and it's not a traditional case study chapter around school tasking, in the sense of there's a lot written about school tasking, about how it works and what it's doing and why it's being successful. And I think we're not very good academics at talking about failure. So essentially the case study is all about everything that has gone wrong with school tasking. And it's really trying not to be an elevator pitch. And it's trying really hard not to say, here's a problem and here's how we solved it, because we haven't solved a number of the problems in the project, and universities still struggle with all the things that I talk about. Some people who run school tasking are on the call today, including Lloyd from King's College. I always get the London universities mixed up. So things like time, money, data not showing what you want it to show, student apathy. Sometimes students are a bit flaky and they don't do what they're meant to do in the sessions, and they don't prepare, and you need to kind of spend all your time trying to get the students to do. We don't have that problem, but a number of universities have said the students are not turning up, or they're not coming to the training, and they're not doing this, they're not doing that. So I presented it in that chapter as a, here's a warts and all account of a project that you would read, that you can read as if you could read other articles as if this project is so polished, but here's actually everything that we struggle with behind closed doors. And I think we need to do that more in academia. We need to say, this is really hard, particularly for the sake of our early career researchers who look at what we do and say, well, why is that so easy? It's not, it never is. And we all have these problems. So hopefully it's a little bit of an honest chapter from that perspective. And I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So Dawn Watkins is Professor of Law at the University of Sheffield, and she's the lead on Project Fortitude, which is a brilliant project, an action research project that aims to improve children and young people's legal capability. She has always used innovative methods in legal education to get children interested and engaged, and particularly through the use of computer games. So Adventures with Lex, which was a great computer game, and then the brilliantly titled Law. Yeah, Lawyer. It's great. And it also features the brilliantly named Advocat. He's a cat. I mean, you can really, nobody can do it better than Dawn. And Dawn was a key player actually at the start of school tasking. So I learned a lot from Dawn and through her wisdom. And she was a very, very helpful person to me at the beginning. And she's someone I've always looked up to. And she's a real pioneer in the field of legal education. So without further ado, also, I'd like to introduce Professor Dawn Watkins.
Gosh, thanks, Ali. To be honest, I feel a bit starstruck on this panel. So it's very nice of you to be so generous in your introduction. Laura's already done a brilliant job of talking about you as authors, and just sort of endorse the sort of respect and admiration that she's expressed for you generally, but also in terms of publishing this book. And I just thought, oh, what's kind of useful or interesting for me to say? And I was thinking about the fact that this is actually a book about legal education in primary schools and how exciting that is, and what a great, it feels like momentum is building compared to when I first started this work. So I thought I'd tell you a story about when I first, so as Ali said, I ran a project where we created a game, sort of like a gaming app called Adventures with Lex. And we ran it in 8 primary schools with over 600 children. And children sort of navigated this fictional world, and they were presented with law-related issues, and they could click the answer they thought through various sort of creative ways, but then they could actually speak to this alien to explain their reasoning for their choices. And we kind of set it up. We didn't use children's rights, we didn't mention the UNCRC in the game, but we did things like, oh, your park is broken and you can't play here. What are you going to do about that? And then they had options, and then, oh, why do you say that? And we're thinking someone's going to say, I've got a right to play. Like someone is going to say that. In fact, in over 600 children, nobody volunteered information about children's rights, which was obviously very disappointing. And some sort of legal knowledge around equality issues and criminal responsibility, but otherwise very low knowledge. And then, but the story that struck me was when we went back into all of our schools to present the findings to all of the children we work with. And I was telling them this, that how sort of surprised and, you know, it was that they hadn't mentioned this really important convention that was all about them. And one of the teachers said, oh, gosh, I think we used to have that on the wall on a poster, but I think it fell off. And that's kind of like that's kind of where I came in, if you like. And it feels like we've moved so far, or maybe I really hope it's not just in our little world. It does feel like we have moved on. And this book is a sort of symbol or a signal to me that we have moved on. And one thing I really love about the book is that it makes the point that sort of law is everywhere, and children and young people and all people are not particularly aware of it unless they need to use it. And it just reminded me of Lady Hale's recent book with Law on Our Side. She's saying that the problem with that is that we don't realise that the law is there to do things for us as well as to us. And the thing I particularly like about the book and welcome about it is that there's an understanding that if children want to understand about the law is there to do something for them, they first need to do something with it. And that's the thing that I think I really celebrate, particularly in the book. And it just reminded me of a sort of more hopeful conversation I had with a young boy in a school sort of more recently, and we were doing a matching game with rights violations, and you had to match it to the most relevant UNCRC article. So I was chatting to him. I guess he was 9 or 10, and I said, "So what do you think? Where are you putting this?" And he said, "Well, do you know what? I think it really depends." And I thought, "Yep." My work here is done. You are already legally qualified. If you can come up with the answer, it depends. We are doing well. So I just really wanted to sort of congratulate you and thank you for publishing this book, and just to join with what Laura said about
sort of it being a really positive move forward and a really sort of authentic description of all the brilliant work that you're all doing. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dawn, for those really kind words as well. I think that image of children's rights falling off the wall, I think that's actually a brilliant metaphor. And I really feel a sense of responsibility, I suppose, working in education, certainly, of making sure that we're continuously sticking those rights back up on the wall, you know, and bringing that awareness to children's rights and how they are used in the classroom. So I think your work, Dawn, and your work, Laura, absolutely contributes directly to that. I mean, Laura, your work is shaping curriculum and how it's being, I suppose, implemented in a real sense for children in classrooms around the new primary curriculum framework. And that's just wonderful to see that's really a meaningful approach. And I suppose as an educationist coming into this space and working with Suzanne, I think my role very much in the book was to try and take the fear out of actually working with children in the classroom. And I've seen that in terms of the students that I've had the privilege to work with from law, who are slightly anxious, I suppose, at the idea of going into a classroom full of 30 young children. So I suppose the work that I've been doing with Suzanne is trying to provide skills and also confidence for young people and students and anybody who hasn't done this type of work before. So my two chapters, I suppose, are really around that. My first chapter describes what community engaged teaching and learning is and how it can be used as a tool for societal transformation. And the book really focuses on how you can take a child-centred, human rights-based approach to community engaged teaching and learning, and I suppose the positive contribution that makes for the children themselves, for students, for universities, for lecturers. And that it's not just one directional, it's actually bi-directional. So that really is the focus of the first chapter. And then the second chapter, I suppose, is around how to take a really positive approach when working with children and young people. Again, that's something that I'm quite passionate myself about. So it's that kind of positive pedagogy. And in that chapter, what I try and do is present a variety of pedagogical approaches to really embed a participatory and youth-centred approach to engaging with young people in the classroom around legal education, as well as education more broadly. And I suppose the other side of it as well is actually thinking about an ethical and moral approach to how you actually engage, particularly around best practice when potentially touching on sensitive topics if you're working in specific contexts. So that's the real focus of my chapter 5 as well. I wanted to ask a couple of questions to the panel that have come up, and I have a couple of questions myself that I have written as I've been listening. And I'm going to start with a question actually I have myself, and I think it speaks, Laura, to the work that you did at the beginning of your career that you were talking about, and Dawn certainly, around creative approaches to legal education. Do you think it's important that we take a creative approach when engaging anybody, I suppose, in legal education? So maybe Laura, do you want to go first? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know. Of course, I agreed. Yeah, I think that, it depends how we define creative. I think maybe engaging, and sometimes I think, should that be creative or should that just be normal? Is that just and you're the pedagogue here, the teacher that's been in the classroom, and with young children in particular. I was really taken with Ali's comment that, it seems dry law, but we know it's not, so sometimes the topic itself doesn't need, creativity beyond really effective, engaged, interactive pedagogy. That's what I would think. And again, taking that fear factor out for teachers. Teachers are great at this. These issues lend themselves to discussion, engagement, debate. you know, so that's really my response. But yeah, the more fun we can make it, the better, as Ali has shown.
Yeah. Dawn, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I suppose I'd echo what Laura says about creative, in the sense that active, I'd probably say active learning is key. Probably my work has been around games and play, but part of the initial driver for that was that it was because it would cut out the adults, that you would have some way of children directly engaging with materials without needing an adult gatekeeper to give them access to it. And so I think that sort of centering the learning around children's experiences, that it's active, that they're doing stuff, is in a sense creative, and I suppose play and gaming has a natural fit to that, but I don't think it has to be. I always feel like my work's a sort of a bit out in the left field, but then there needs to be it's more my concern is that it's based around children's lived experiences and around them doing something. I think it's because I just cannot bear. I don't think this applies just to children. I cannot bear just sitting and someone telling me something. I find I've always been like that since I was little. I would much rather be doing something. I think most of us are like that.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers the question.
Brilliant. And I think Lloyd brought that into the question he was asking as well, this idea around having fun. I mean, is there a sort of contradiction in terms in how law is perceived and then how we want people to engage in law through using fun? Is that something that you think is important?
Yeah, that's a question for Ali, surely.
Yeah, I can come in on that. Well, I mean, Lloyd knows this because Lloyd is, as I say, Lloyd runs school tasking. But I mean, I just came at school tasking with the perspective of children are brilliant at legal reasoning. Like they really are. I was speaking at a CSR network meeting this morning and saying this, that I actually say to the children that they're better, and I mean it, they're better at legal reasoning than my law students, because law students are constrained by what they think the law is. They don't want to look silly in front of their peers if they get the wrong answer. They're trying to give the answer they think I want, and they're trying to give the right answer that is the law. Whereas children, honestly, I've had some brilliant examples of children coming at legal problems from hugely innovative and creative means of thinking. And they really do, because they answer questions on law rationally and honestly, and with this innate sense of fairness that I think we all lose slightly as we get older. You know, they're like, that's not fair. And they're like, that's true. And I can give a great example of this, where actually a little girl in year 5, so age 9, gave a response to a legal problem that I think was better than what the judge in the case had, the example he'd given. It's a hilarious case called Holiday against Henry, where, true story, a law had said that your car will be taxed if it's on the road, and this guy had lifted it up and put it on roller skates and said it's not on the road, it's on roller skates. And the judge in the case went through all of these iterations of, well, what if it was on paper, and what if it was on this? And this wee girl just put her hand up and said, but if you were a person on the road on roller skates, you'd still be on the road. And I was like, that is utterly brilliant. And this was not mentioned by the judge in the case. So I think children, you know, if you pose interesting problems to children, they will come up with interesting solutions, and they'll love doing it, and they'll love arguing with each other in a positive way around, is a Jaffa cake a cake or a biscuit? And their teachers get involved. And, you know, I think law is inherently fun. We don't think of it as fun, but it is inherently fun because it's posing problems and trying to find solutions to those. So if you package up those problems in a fun way, and we do things in school tasking like get the kids to recreate cases out of Lego, and one of those cases is R against Dudley and Stevens, the Don't Eat the Cabin Boy case, which is about cannibalism, and they love doing that because they get to gory and use skeletons and red brick. And I think you can get kids to think, wow, this is really interesting and really fun. But I think given the opportunity, law can be brilliantly fun.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ali. Suzanne, in terms of the work that your students do in the classroom with the children, what do you see as the greatest benefit to taking that kind of creative approach or engaging them in terms of even bringing them in to undertake a mock trial and bringing it to life for them?
Well, I think just tying in with the last question, the coming into and the preparation indeed for the mock trial, it's amazing. When we started, I suppose somebody has asked the question, have children been involved in developing the methodology? So I want to bring that in as well. When we started this experiment, we were all really feeling our way was how, are we going to do a mock trial with children insofar as what will the topics be, et cetera, et cetera. Over time, it became very clear, in fact, in the first year, that of course, involving the children in making decisions around what do they want to have a mock trial about. And as time has gone on, involving them entirely in coming up with their own script, etc., has made all the difference because it's material for starters that they're deeply interested in, and the range of problem scenarios that they come up with. Thinking of you, Ali, saying the same thing about children have an innate sense of justice and so on. It is extraordinary to me the way they will come up with problems that you can really see that there are two sides of the argument. For example, we had, our students would at the very beginning of every session ask the kids to talk about what their favorite hobbies are and so on, and glean, for example, that they're all interested in different sports and singers and celebs and so on. And the next thing you know, you have a mock trial about a particular, I can't even remember the name of them, Mo Salah from Liverpool kicks the ball into the stand in Wembley, and Taylor Swift is happening to be sitting there. She's not looking in the right direction, etc. And she's hit, and all sorts of, complexions to this trial. But they come in and they argue and they have incredible crack. And even though I know we don't wear wigs and gowns anymore, we still offer to the children, if you want to dress up, you can dress up in these wigs and gowns the way they used to in days of old and so on. And not only that, the kids actually always ask, can we bring in our own costumes as well as, and so they dress up as witnesses and so on. So it's all very creative. And at the end of the day, I think relearning is happening because they're stimulated, they're interested. And as Ali says, I think our students learn a huge amount. I always think that, especially when it comes to rights and responsibilities, there's no, kind of more apt place to find out about justice and so on than a children's playground. There are no filters. And so we really do learn an awful lot from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. One question I'd like to ask is around, I suppose, the greatest threat to doing this work. And I'm going to tie it a little bit into Ashling's question around, social media. I mean, I think children and young people now have information at the tip of at their fingertips. Particularly, I suppose, around anything to do with legalities, whether they see it one way or another, whether that's truthful or whether it's fake is also very problematic as well. Do you think, my question is, what is the greatest threat or barrier, do you think, to legal education and making it more accessible, I suppose, to anybody or to young people? Really interested to hear your views on that. Laura, will I pick on you again? Only because you mentioned it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could pick one, to be honest, and I think several of them have already been mentioned. And, disinformation is one of the problems, particularly around law and human rights, and it's so easy for, armchair lawyers to pop on and say, everyone's got a right to this or right to that or right not, and with not a very informed way of understanding how we handle conflicts of rights, for example. So even, your example in mock trials, issues are usually interesting because there's a conflict of rights and conflict of interest. So we don't need to just know what your right is. You need to know how to handle when rights clash or interests clash. So I suppose having that, as well as making it fun, and understanding that often these areas are grey and there's no right answer, and, the way that justice gets served. I mean, I suppose the other thing, not to legal education, I mean, we've always had, your book does it so well. I'm not going to, read the book, because you set out all of these issues so well about what the challenges are, and there are, particularly, I think, because it's about in the classroom. And you said it yourself, Dee, there is a lack of confidence there, you know, because law has already been set up in most of our minds to be something specialized and external to us that you need these experts on. And of course, what your book does is really tries to bring down those barriers and show that you can, if we can't explain what laws in the ways that people who are the subject of these laws understand, we're doomed, you know. So I think we need work like this to do it well and to be fun, but also to be serious, because there are some really serious issues like the social media ban. You know, in itself, it's a threat to the right to information. We've already just had these blanket bans without serious consideration of children's own perspectives and what would be necessary and proportionate in limiting this really important human right, you know, without them. So there's so many issues there. And also, you know, I mean, children have a right to learn about their rights. You know, they have a right to human rights education in the convention. And so it's under threat at the minute. You know, it's not the poster falling off the wall, Dawn, you know, it is an absolute metaphor for it all, isn't it? You know, it's dated and it fell and we didn't put it back up again. It doesn't really matter. You know, it's that these are all challenges. I can't really pick one. And but the book covers, I think, them all and also provides practical ways in which we can address them.
Thanks a million, Laura. Dawn, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of turns into a bit depressing again, doesn't it? But, I don't know, something I've found really helpful is that I've been working with a friend of mine who's a psychology professor. We're writing a book as well, and that's been really helpful to have somebody who's not a lawyer involved. And so I'm having to understand psychology and she's having to understand law, and that has been really beneficial. But the thing we've both been thinking about recently is that children and all people start from somewhere. We're not going into they're not empty vessels, so it's disrupting what's already known and thought about, and all the stuff that's in the book about constructivism and all of that is addressing those issues. And then something I learned about recently, which makes a lot of sense to me now, is something called Dunning-Kruger syndrome, which is apparently well established, and many of you will know about it, I'm sure, but it was news to me, that if you have sort of a low level, so knowing nothing is something, but knowing something, I probably won't explain this properly, but knowing something makes you predisposed to being more confident that you've got it right. Does that make sense? Yes. So, and I think that is really what's happening a lot. And that is what we need. There's a sort of challenge there to sort of be unpacking. I think it applies to adults and children. One of the things that struck me in my first project was that children referred to themselves as people. And they are a unique group of people, but they're people. And this thing is common to people. So I think it's just sort of being strategic about sort of thinking about the way we approach things and knowing that it's just not as simple as going in and delivering something. That's not what we're going to do. Or if we try that's just not going to work. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what I've been thinking about.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dawn and Laura, for that.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just I noticed that Louise has asked a question about involving children in the methodologies. Yes. Can I just put that question to Dawn? Dawn has been an inspiration for me on this front, in this terms of when anything's developed. Dawn's always the voice going, have you spoken to children about this? Have you involved children in the creation? So maybe I think that's a nice question for you, Dawn, and how do you encourage children to get involved, and how do you give them space to do that? I think that's a nice one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of you to say that, Ali. I feel like it's one of the most ethically challenging aspects of my work, and I think that because you don't want to be tokenistic, and it's almost better not to ask if you've already decided what you're going to do. So I can give I'm still thinking about all of this, but some of the most effective work that I've been able to do is with child advisory boards, child and young people advisory boards. So on the first project, there's the National Children's Bureau had a group who was set up, and we would go in. I paid to go and present the idea, sort of pitched it to them, and it was one of them that said, well, that's all very well having a game, but what about having an alien in it? Why don't you have an alien? And I like, bingo. And so that is why there is an alien in that. Now that's a really sort of fortuitous example, but I had already decided it was going to be a game. So there is always, and we had, It took me ages to try and get in place 2 child and young people advisory boards. And in the secondary setting, that's so difficult to get all the students in because they're all in different form. Like you turn up, some of them aren't there, and they're much more sort of a moving target, if you like. But we work with a group of primary children from year 3, and they're now in year 6, and we work consistently with those over time. But again, we're still going forward and saying this is going to be a game, these are the ideas, which one would you choose? So they had sort of legitimate voice or impact in terms of decision making, but they didn't come up with the whole idea. Do you see what I mean? So I feel like that's probably the least, the part of my work that feels the least comfortable to me, that I haven't cracked at. I don't think I ever will. So I think there's lots of things that make it difficult for researchers especially to work directly with children.
Thanks, Dawn. And maybe the same question to Laura, since Laura's like the godmother of asking children their opinions on things.
Fairy godmother? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, my answer. I mean, I know Louise very well, and Louise is an incredible expert in this field, and I know that she's doing incredible work with the Child and Youth Friendly Governance Project as well, to involve young people in all sorts of work, including understanding their human rights. You know, there's great work out there, and I mean, none of us can come at this work, I think, properly without involving students. You just can't, you just can't do it. And you all know this. And yes, I mean, I learned it 20 years ago. And, in the work that I have done in this field, with, for example, again, I noticed Smiliana Frick is in the call. Smiliana Frick has done incredible work on children, human rights defenders. We did work initially for the Committee on the Rights of the Child on that. Smiliana was involved in that through Child Rights Connect. You can't have children able to defend their human rights unless they understand. And one of the things those children said to us is one of the foundational stones is learning about their rights, And then the question then is, how can we involve them in the things that enable them so they learn in ways that are relevant and engaging and matter to them? And I think, again, you give very different examples from the way that you approach it. But at the heart, I think, of what runs through a kind of golden thread, and there are many probably golden threads in your book, is that commitment to rights and that commitment to children's right to be heard. Where, thank you, godmother's a new title for it. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. Dawn, your hand is up. I'm wondering, did you want to come in again?
Well, Laura's comment just made me think of something else I've been thinking about, and just sort of just listening to discourse around children, is that children can need also to be involved in solving the problems. They have the solutions. It's a bit like Ali was saying, that with a young child can sum up the roller skate case in like one line, and we would take 500 pages. And I feel like they're this sort of superpower of people that have the answers, and we are only really asking them about the problems quite a lot of the time. And so that's something I feel that I'd like to see more of generally in the world. But yeah, I'll be quiet now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dawn. I think taking that kind of child-centered approach to anything we do, whether it's in legal education or in the school classroom, is so important. And that idea of co-creating learning in an environment which really values and places children at the heart of pedagogy. And I just want to give a nod actually to Professor Dimpna Devine, who's also here, who's done a lot of work in that space and has done really important work. So I think building on that is really, really important. So it's wonderful to have so many amazing people on the call today. I'm going to finish, I suppose, with a question for you around a piece of advice for somebody interested in doing this type of work. How do we where do you start, or what do you do, or what piece of advice would you give anybody who's interested in working around legal education or connecting in with communities to do this type of work? In our book, actually in chapter 8, we do provide a framework around that. We give sort of questions for you to reflect on in terms of how to plan for this type of work. We actually give a planning template to help structure this type of work right from the beginning of thinking about the purpose for adopting a community-engaged teaching and learning approach, to how to get started, how to review it, how to sustain it, and how to put children and young people at the heart of the work as well. So that framework is there in chapter 8. But one piece of advice that you would give to somebody interested in doing this type of work, Ali, I'm going to start with you first.
Okay, it's a very good question, Dee. I think, based a little bit on my school tasking chapter, I think we all need to be a little bit more honest about the challenges we face in doing this type of work, because I think quite often it feels like we're reinventing the wheel, because all that we see, as I say, is the polished output. And I think if we can just all be a little bit more honest in how difficult things were and how we tried to overcome those problems, then I think that's a really good way that as a community we can keep moving forward, rather than 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I think that's a key piece of advice I'd offer. Let's all be honest about failure, because we all fail at things and that's okay. And I think my other piece of advice would be just keep tweaking and adapting, and ask the children particularly for their feedback on anything that you're doing and whether or not it can be improved. So I think that's we do that every year in school tasking. We go back to the drawing board. There's one task that's been the bane of my existence. Dawn will know what it is, and Lloyd will know what it is probably. The bane of my existence for years in getting it right. It's a legal drafting task, and every year I've gone through various iterations and I get children to feedback. Did they understand this? How could I do it better? And I think we've now got to a place where it works, but it's taken a lot of time and it's taken a lot of input from the children, the students, and my colleagues. So I think it's that, that continuous loop of let's make it better. Let's make everything we do the best version of it, and using the wonderful expertise and knowledge of everybody around, children, students, colleagues, because everybody has brilliant ideas and we just need to channel them into everything that we're doing. So sorry, that was probably 2 pieces of advice, Dee. I didn't follow you.
That's brilliant.
Sorry.
And children are always fairly upfront, I think, in terms of giving feedback.
Yes, for sure.
Which is brilliant. Suzanne, what advice would you give?
Well, I'd second everything Ali has said, but I suppose my big piece of advice would be go for it. Because I do think that while there are significant challenges, once you embark on this work, I think it is extraordinarily rewarding. And I think you're pushing an open door, actually, especially when you have great support around you. And I have to give a shout out to the university here. I've had enormous support from the school. I see our Dean, Imelda Marr, is on the call as well. And I'm particularly grateful for her for actually getting me involved in this work in the first place, and also to UCD Access and Lifelong Learning, which gives enormous support. And then we also have fabulous financial support as well from our donors. So I do think it's important that it is recognised that you do need resources to run programmes like this. You do need help from funders, I think, to put the show on the road. But again, there has been great support in that direction, and I'm confident that we will build on that. So when it comes to going to the schools, I suppose I wondered, will they be interested in this program? There hasn't been a school that we've approached that hasn't welcomed the initiative with open arms, contributed to it in an incredibly positive way. And as for the children, I have never been so energized in my career of going into those classrooms. And as we've said from the word go, just, being so enriched by their participation and everything that they have done to make our programme the success that it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Laura, if you were given a piece of advice on this kind of messy work, which I know you've spoken about before, of working with children and putting them to the forefront and the tensions around that, what advice would you give us?
Yeah, I suppose, I was listening to the others and not really thinking of my own answer, but what was what was this quote that comes into my head, often was running through my head, and it's a one you'll all know. It's like a Martin Luther King comment about how we deliver justice. And he says, it's not law or education, it's law and education. And I've always loved that as a kind of thing in my own career, like as a lawyer who moved in education school back to law, don't know what I am anymore. But, we can't deliver justice without law and education, and legal education is this one element of it that you've picked this piece of the puzzle. And so I think my advice there is, and you've mentioned it already, you got to work together. You can't have lawyers get in telling teachers what to do, and likewise teachers, can't deliver the law without that legal expertise. And so the work that, you're the epitome of this practice, getting the three of you together and creating this work and creating it ways that is respectful of both sets of knowledges. And that really gets to the question you've asked me, you can't do that without children either. So I suppose the advice is, find your people and collaborate and make sure those people include the people this matters to most, which would be children.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Laura. And Dawn, going back to your metaphor of how do we stick that children's rights poster back up on the wall? What advice would you give around this piece of work?
Well, I think Laura just said the phrase, find your people. And I think the most effective work I've been able to do is when I've had a key relationship with somebody in a school. And then that enables you to have the relationship with the children and just to be really honest with them about what the work is you're doing, what the children's role is, what you're asking of them. But yeah, it would be really, my advice would be to invest in relationships. In meaningful long-term relationships would be my advice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to draw our launch today. Today marks publication day for our book, Legal Education in the Classroom. So we're so thrilled and so grateful, as we say in the Irish language, buíochas ó chroí. So thank you from the heart to Professor Dawn Watkins and Professor Laura Lundy for making time in your busy schedules to be here with us today. We so appreciate it. We want to also thank the team at Bristol University Press, including Zoe, Grace, Leanne and Alexandra, who have guided us through the whole process. We also want to say buíochas ó chroí to Andrew Woods here, our educational technologist in the UCD School of Education, who has helped make sure that this has run smoothly and set it up. So thank you so much, Andrew, for your help. I want to thank Ali and Suzanne for the collaboration and the work and the positivity. I have learned so much from you both through this process, and I really look forward to continuing to work together as we develop and grow together, I think, in this space. Because it's certainly that cross-pollination, that multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary work. I don't think we can do anything in social science without actually working together in that way. I'd like to thank all our family and friends. Myself, Ali and Suzanne would like to thank you all for your support in helping us across that finish line with the book. And most importantly, thank you all so much for making time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today at this online launch. And please do get in touch if you have any questions or queries. We'd love to hear from you. But thank you all so much for being here today.